Hello viewers, welcome to my channel Online Biology Tutorials. In this live of today, I will be reading the chapter Organisms and Populations taken from the unit Ecology. In case you are interested in hearing the audio of prior chapters, you can visit the same playlist. Audios always helps you in revising the chapter and finding it out that whether you have understood what is given in NCERT or do you still require another reading. These audios will be very helpful for your board examination, for your CUET as well as for your NEET. You can give relaxation, close your eyes and listen to the audio with concentration. So as my voice is clear, the video is also clear. Let's progress with the reading of the chapter Organisms and Populations. This is chapter number 11 from NCERT of Class 12th Biology. This is going to be an important chapter having a lot of concepts, lot of examples. Let's go ahead. Our living world is fascinatingly diverse and amazingly complex. We can try to understand its complexity by investigating processes at various levels of biological organization. Macromolecules, cells, tissues, organs, individual organisms, population, communities, ecosystems, and biomes. At any level of the biological organization, we can ask two types of questions. For example, when we hear the bulbul singing early morning in the garden, we may ask, how does the bird sing? Or why does the bird sing? The how type questions seek the mechanism behind the process, while the why type questions seek the significance of the process. For the first question in our example, the answer might be in terms of the operation of the voice box and the vibrating bone in the bird, whereas in the second question, the answer may lie in the bird's need to communicate with its mate during breeding season. When you observe nature around you with a scientific frame of mind, you will certainly come up with many interesting questions of both types. Why are night blooming flowers generally white? How does the bee know which flower has nectar? Why does cactus have so many thorns? How does the chick spears recognize her own mother? And so on. You have already learnt in previous classes that ecology is a subject which studies the interaction among organisms and between the organism and its physical or abiotic environment. Ecology is basically concerned with four levels of biological organization: organisms, populations, communities, and biomes. In this chapter, we explore ecology at population levels. Population attributes. In nature, we rarely find isolated, single individuals of any species. Majority of them live in groups in a well-defined geographical area, share or compete for similar resources, potentially interbreed, and thus constitute a population. Although the term interbreeding implies sexual reproduction, a group of individuals resulting from even asexual reproduction is also generally considered a population for the purpose of ecological studies. All the cormorants in a wetland, rats in an abundant dwelling, teakwood trees in a forest track, bacteria in a culture plate, and lotus plants in a pond are some examples of a population. In earlier chapters, you have learned that although an individual organism is the one that has to cope with the diverse or changed environment, it is at the population level that natural selection operates to evolve the desired traits. Population ecology is therefore an important area because it links ecology to population genetics and evolution. A population has certain attributes whereas an individual organism does not. An individual may have births and deaths, but a population has birth rates and death rates. In a population, these rates refer to per capita births and deaths. The rates, hence, expressed are change in numbers, which may be increase or decrease with respect to members of the population. Here is an example. If it in a pond there were 20 lotus plants last year and through reproduction 8 new plants are added, taking the current population to 28, we calculate the birth rate as 8 by 20, which gives you zero point 0.4 offsprings per lotus per year. If 4 individuals in a laboratory population of 40 fruit flies died during a specified time interval, say a week, the death rate in the population during that period is 4 by 40, which gives you zero point 0.1 individuals per fruit fly per week. Another attribute characteristic of a population is sex ratio. An individual is either a male or a female, but a population has a sex ratio. Example, 60% of the population are females and 40% are males. A population at any given time is composed of individuals of different ages. If the age distribution is plotted for the population, the resulting structure is known as age pyramid. For human population, the age pyramids generally show age distribution of males and females in a diagram. The shape of the pyramids reflects the growth status of the population, whether it is growing or stable or is it declining. The size of the population tells us a lot about its status in the habitat. Whatever ecological processes we wish to investigate in a population, be it the overcome of competition with another species, the impact of a predator, or the effect of a pesticide application, we always evaluate them in terms of any change in the population size. The size in nature could be as low as 10 Siberian cranes at Bharatpur wetlands in any year, or go into millions like Chlamydomonas in a pond. Population size technically is called population density. Density is designated as capital N. Need not necessarily be measured in numbers only, although total number is generally the most appropriate measure of population density. It is in some cases either meaningless or difficult to determine. In an area, if there are 200 carrot grass, Parthenium, hysterophorus plants, but only a single huge banyan tree with a large canopy, stating that the population density of a banyan is low relative to that of the carrot grass, among the underestimating the enormous role of the banyan in that community. In such cases, the percent cover or biomass is a more meaningful measure of the population size. Total number is again not an easily adoptable measure if the population is huge, and counting is impossible or very time consuming. If you have a less dense laboratory culture of bacteria in a petri dish, what is the best measure to report its density? Sometimes, for certain ecological investigations, there is no need to know the absolute population densities. Relative densities serve the purpose equally well. For instance, the number of fish caught per trap is good enough measure of its total population density in the lake. We are mostly obliged to estimate population sizes indirectly without actually them. Just wait, I have lost where I was reading. No worries, I can start from here. In such cases, the percent or biomass is more meaningful measure of the population size. Total number is again not an easily adoptable measure if the population is huge and counting is impossible or very time consuming. If you have a less if you have a dense laboratory culture of bacteria in a petri dish, what is the best measure to report its density? Sometimes, for certain ecological investigations, there is no need to know the absolute population densities. Relative densities serve the purpose equally well. For instance, The number of fish caught per trap is good enough measure of its total population density in the lake. We are mostly obliged to estimate population sizes indirectly without actually counting them or seeing them. The tiger census in our national parks and tiger reserves is often based on pug marks and fecal pellets. Next topic, population growth. The size of a population for any species is not a static parameter. It keeps changing with time depending on various factors including the food availability, predation pressure and adverse weather. In fact, it is these changes in population density that give us some idea of what is happening to the population, whether it is flourishing or declining. Whatever might be the ultimate reasons, the density of the population in a given habitat during a given period fluctuates due to changes in four basic processes, two of which are natality and immigration contribute to increase in the population density, and two, example mortality and emigration leads to a decrease. So, natality refers to the number of births during a given period in the population that are added to the initial density. Mortality is the number of deaths in the population during a given period. Immigration is the number of individuals of the same species that have come into the habitat from elsewhere during the time period under consideration. Immigration is the number of individuals of the population who left the habitat and gone elsewhere during the time period under consideration. So, if n is the population density at time t, then its density at time t plus 1 is nt plus 1 is equals to nt. Then you will be adding the value coming to you after subtracting d plus e from b plus I. I is emigration. You can see from the above equation that population density will increase if the number of birds plus the number of immigrants is more than the number of deaths plus the number of immigrants. Under normal conditions, birds and deaths are the most important factors influencing population density. The other two factors assuming importance only under special conditions. For instance, if a new habitat is just being colonized, immigration may contribute more significantly to population growth than birth rates. Next topic is growth models. Does the growth of a population with time show any specific and predictable pattern? We have been concerned about unbridled human population growth and problems created by it in our country, and it is therefore natural for us to be curious if different animal populations in nature behave the same way or show some restraints on growth. Perhaps we can learn a lesson or two from nature on how to control population growth. Exponential growth. Resource like food and space availability is obviously essential for the unimpeded growth of a population. Ideally, when resources in the habitat are unlimited, each species has the ability to realize fully its innate potential to grow in number. As Darwin observed while developing his theory of natural selection, then the population grows in an exponential or geometric fashion. If within a population of size n, the birth rate, not total number but per capita births, are represented as b and death rate, again per capita death rate as d, then the increase or decrease in n during a unit time t, as it is a change in time, thus we will be using it dn by dt, will be dn by dt is equals to b minus d into n. B minus d is known as r, and dn by dt change over a period of time will be equal to r into n. R is intrinsic rate of natural increase, and it is a very important parameter chosen for assessing impacts of any biotic or abiotic factor on population growth. To give you some idea about the magnitude of R values for the Norway rat, the R is 0.015, and for the floor beetle it is 0.12. In 1981 the R value for human population in India was 0.0205. Find out what R value is currently. For calculating it, you need to know the birth rates as well as the death rate. The above equation describes the exponential or geographical growth pattern of a population and results in a J-shaped curve when we plot n in relation to time. If you are familiar with basic calculus, you can derive the integral form of the exponential growth equation as nt is equals to n0 ERT. Nt is population density after time t. N0 is population density at time 0. R is intrinsic rate of natural increase, whereas E is the base of natural logarithm. Such type of graph which is given in figure 11.3 is very important. Here A is given you showing you the J-shaped one and B is showing you the exponential one. Population density has been taken on the y-axis denoted by capital N, whereas time taken on the x-axis and it is denoted by t. So A is denoting exponential growth, whereas B is denoting logistic growth. This is previous year question. So always remember letter J is related to exponential, and this S-shaped curve which you can see plotted with the help of blue line, it is sigmoid curve and it is more realistic and it is logistic curve. Okay, every time a board question comes on it, do prepare about it and their equations also. Any species growing exponentially under unlimited resource condition can reach enormous population densities in a short time. Darwin showed that even a slow growing animal like elephant could reach enormous numbers in the absence of checks. The following is an anecdote popularly narrated to demonstrate dramatically how fast a huge population could build up when growing exponentially. So the next paragraph is based upon probability. You can skip it. It does not make any sense and no question has ever been asked from this. We are coming to the logistic growth. No population of any species in nature has at its disposal unlimited resources to permit exponential growth. This leads to competition between individuals or limited resources. Eventually, the fittest individual will survive and reproduce. The government of many countries have also realized this fact and introduced various restraints with a view to limit human population growth. In nature, a given habitat has enough resources to support a maximum possible number, beyond which no further growth is possible. Let us call this limit as nature's carrying capacity or letter K for that species in that habitat. A population growing in a habitat with limited resources show initially a lag phase, followed by phases of acceleration and deceleration, and finally a asymptote where the population density reaches the carrying capacity. A plot of n means population density in relation to the time t results in a sigmoid curve. This type of population growth is known as Verhulst-Pearl logistic growth. Always remember, they have given a question in boards with the name of Verhulst-Pearl growth curve. So please relate it with logistic growth curve. And it is described by the following equation: dn by dt is equals to rn k minus n upon k, where n is the population density at time t, r is the intrinsic rate of natural increase, and k is the carrying capacity. Since resources for growth for most animal populations are finite and become limiting sooner or later, logistic growth model is considered a more realistic one. 11.1.3 Life history variation. Populations evolve to maximize their reproductive fitness, also called Darwinian fitness, high R value, in the habitat in which they live. Under a particular set of selection pressures, organisms evolve towards the most efficient reproductive strategy. Some organisms breed only once in their lifetime, like Pacific salmon fish, and bamboo, while other breeds many times during their lifetime like birds and mammals. Some produce a large number of small size offsprings like oysters and pelagic fishes, while others produce a large number of large size offsprings like birds and animals. So, which is desirable for maximizing the fitness? Ecologists suggest that life history traits of organisms have evolved in relation to the constraints imposed by the abiotic and biotic components of the habitat in which they live. Evolution of life history traits in different species is currently an important area of research being conducted by ecologists. Next topic is very important, but before I progress further, it's my earnest request write any three keywords that you have imbibed by the reading done so far. So your time starts now. Quickly write it down, any three keywords. I hope you have been done till now. Can you think of any natural habitat on Earth that is inhabited just by a single species? There is no such habitat, and such a situation is even unconceivable. For any species, the minimal requirement is one or more species on which it can feed. Even a plant species which makes its own food cannot survive alone. It needs soil microbes to break down the organic matter in soil and return the inorganic nutrients for absorption. And then, how will the plants manage pollination without an animal agent? It is obvious that in nature, animals, plants, microbes do not and cannot live in isolation but interact in various ways to form a biological community. Even in minimal communities, many interactive linkages exist, although all may not be readily apparent. Interspecific interactions arise from the interaction of population of two different species. They could be beneficial, detrimental, or neutral. So for beneficial, book has used the symbol of plus. For detrimental, book has used the symbol of minus, and for neutral, they have used the zero. 0 also shows the neutral interaction. Let us look at the possible outcomes of interspecific interactions. Both the species benefit in mutualism and both lose in competition in their interactions with each other. In both parasitism and predation, only one species benefits, predator and a parasite respectively. So relationship with parasite is parasitism, relationship with predator is predation, and the interaction is detrimental to the other species, host and prey respectively. The interaction where one species is benefit and the other is neither benefited nor harmed, it is commensalism. And amensalism, on the other hand, one species is harmed whereas the other is unaffected. Predation, parasitism, and commensalism share a common characteristics. The interacting species live closely altogether. So we are coming to the first relationship, which is predation. What would happen to all the energy fixed by the autotrophic organisms if the community has no animals to eat the plants? You can think of predation as nature's way of transferring to higher trophic levels the energy fixed by the plants. When we think of a predator and prey, most probably it is the tiger and the deer that readily come to our mind, but a sparrow eating any seed is no less a predator. Although animals eating plants are categorized separately as herbivores, they are in a broad ecological context not very different from predators. Beside acting as conduits for energy transfer across trophic levels, predators play an important role. They keep prey population under control, but for predators, prey species could achieve very high population densities and cause ecosystem instability. When certain exotic species are introduced into a geographical area, they become invasive and start spreading fast because the invaded land does not have its natural predators. The prickly pear or cactus, introduced into Australia in the early 1920s, caused havoc by spreading rapidly into millions of hectares of rangeland. Finally, the invasive cactus was brought under control only after cactus feeding predator, which was a moth, from its natural habitat was introduced into the country. Biological control methods adopted in agriculture pest control are based on the ability of the predator to regulate prey population. Predators also help in maintaining species diversity in a community by reducing the intensity of competition among competing prey species. In the rocky intertidal communities of the American Pacific coast, the starfish, I think I have left one page. No, I think book has left one page. No, it's correct. So I have to read from here because we were on predation, right? We were on predation, yes. To regulate prey population, predators also help in maintaining species diversity in a community by regulating the intensity of competition among competing prey species in the rocky intertidal communities of the American Pacific coast. The starfish pisaster is an important predator. In a field experiment, when all the starfish were removed from an enclosed intertidal area, more than 10 species of invertebrates became extinct within a year because of interspecific competition. If a predator is too efficient and overexploits its prey, then the prey might become extinct, and following it, the predator will also become extinct for lack of food. This is the reason why predators in nature are prudent. Prey species have evolved various defenses to lessen the impact of predation. Some species of insects and frogs are cryptically colored, camouflaged to avoid being detected easily by the predator. Some are poisonous and therefore avoided by the predators. The monarch butterfly is highly distasteful to its predator bird because of the special chemical present in its body. Interestingly, the butterfly acquires this chemical during its caterpillar stage by feeding on poisonous weed. For plants, herbivores are the predators. Nearly 25% of the insects are known to be phytophagous, feeding on plant sap and other parts of the plants. The problem is particularly severe for plants because, unlike animals, they cannot run away from the predators. Plants, therefore, have evolved an astonishing variety of morphological and chemical defenses against herbivores. Thorns in acacia and cactus are the most common morphological means of defense. Many plants produce and store chemicals that make the herbivore sick when they are eaten, inhibit feeding or digestion, disrupt their reproduction, or even kill it. You may have seen the weed calotropis growing in abundant fields. The plant produces high poisonous cardiac glycosides, and that is why you never see any cattle or goats browsing on this plant. A wide variety of chemical substances that we extract from plants on a commercial scale, like nicotine, caffeine, quinine, styrene, opium, etc., are produced by them actually as defenses against grazers or browsers. All the examples that I have spoken so far are very, very important, and majority of the lines are the ones on which previous year questions are based on. I'm coming to the second population interaction, which is competition. When Darwin spoke of the struggle for existence and survival for existence in nature, survival of the fittest in nature, he was convinced that interspecific competition is a potent force in organic evolution. It is generally believed that competition occurs when closely related species compete for the same resources that are limiting. But this is not entirely true. Firstly, totally unrelated species could also compete for the same resource. For instance, in some shallow South American lakes, visiting flamingos and resident fishes compete for their common food, the zooplankton in the lake. Secondly, resources need not to be limiting for competition to occur. In interference competition, the feeding efficiency of one species might be reduced due to the interfering and inhibitory presence of the other species, even if resources like food and space are abundant. Therefore, competition is best defined as a process in which the fitness of one species, measured in terms of its R or the intrinsic rate of increase, is significantly lower in the presence of another species. It is relatively easy to demonstrate in laboratory experiments, as Gauss and other experimental ecologists did. When resources are limited, the competitively superior species will eventually eliminate the other species, but evidence for such competitive exclusion occurring in nature is not always conclusive. Strong and persuasive circumstantial evidence does exist, however, in some cases. The Abington tortoise in Galapagos Islands became extinct within a decade after goats were introduced on the island, apparently due to the greater browsing efficiency of the goats. Another evidence for the occurrence of competition in nature comes from what is called as competitive release, a species whose distribution is restricted to a small geographical area because of the presence of a competitively superior species is found to expand its distributional range dramatically when the competing species is experimentally removed. Connell's elegant field experiment showed that on the rocky sea coast of Scotland, the larger and competitively superior barnacle Balanus dominates the intertidal area and excludes the smaller barnacle Cathamalus from that zone. In general, herbivores and plants appear to be more adversely affected by competition than carnivores. Gauss' competitive exclusion principle states that two closely related species competing for the same resources cannot coexist indefinitely, and the competitively inferior one will be eliminated eventually. This may be true if the resources are limiting, but not otherwise. More recent studies do not support such gross generalizations about competition, while they do not rule out the occurrence of interspecific competition in nature. They point out that species facing competition might evolve mechanisms to promote coexistence rather than exclusion. One such mechanism is resource partitioning. If two species compete for the same resource, they could avoid competing by choosing, for instance, different times for feeding or different foraging patterns. MacArthur showed that five closely related species of warblers living on the same tree were able to avoid competition and coexist due to behavioral differences in their foraging activities. Next population interaction is parasitism. Considering that the parasite mode of life ensures free lodging and meals, it is not surprising that parasitism has evolved in so many taxonomic groups from plants to higher vertebrates. Many parasites have evolved to be host specific in such a way that both host and parasite tend to co evolve. That is, if the host evolves specific or special mechanisms for rejecting or resisting the parasite has to evolve mechanisms to counteract and neutralize them. In order to be successful with the same host species, in accordance with their lifestyles, parasites evolve special adaptations such as the loss of unnecessary sense organs, presence of adhesive organs or suckers to cling onto the host, loss of digestive system and high reproductive capacity. The lifestyles of parasite are often complex, involving one to more intermediate host or vectors to facilitate parasitization of its primary host. The human liver fluke, a trematode parasite, depends on two intermediate hosts, which are snail and fish, to complete its life cycle. The malarial parasite needs a vector, which is mosquito, to spread to other hosts. Majority of the parasites harm the host. They may reduce the survival, growth and reproduction of the host and reduce the population density. They might render the host more vulnerable to predation by making it physically weak. Do you believe that an idle parasite should be able to thrive within the host without harming it? Then why didn't natural selection lead to evolution of such totally harmless parasites? Parasites that feed on the external surface of the host organism are called ectoparasites. The most familiar examples of this group are the lice on human and ticks on dogs. Many marine fishes are infested with ectoparasitic copepods. Cuscuta, a parasitic plant, this is commonly found growing on hedge plants, has lost its chlorophyll and leaves in the course of evolution. It derives the nutrition from the host plant where it parasites. The female mosquito is not considered as a parasite, although it needs our blood for reproduction. Can you explain why? In contrast, endoparasites are those that live inside the host body at different sites, which could be liver, kidney, lungs, RBCs, etc. The life cycles of endoparasite are more complex because of their extreme specialization. Their morphological and anatomical features are greatly simplified while emphasizing their reproductive potential. Brood parasitism in birds is a fascinating example of parasitism in which the parasitic bird lays its eggs in the nest of its host and lets the host incubate them. During the course of evolution, the eggs of the parasitic bird have evolved to resemble the host's egg in size and color to reduce the chances of the host bird detecting the foreign eggs and ejecting them from the nest. Try to follow the movements of the cuckoo or the quail and the crow in your neighborhood park during the breeding season, which is spring to summer, and watch brood parasitism in action. So, whatever keywords you are able to imbibe by now, please write any three of your choice prior to the portion of this topic, commensalism. Go ahead and write in the chat. I hope it is done. Commensalism. This is the interaction in which one species benefits and the other is neither harmed nor benefited. An orchid growing as an epiphyte on a mango branch and barnacles growing on the back of a whale benefit, while neither the mango tree nor the whale derives any apparent benefit. The cattle egret and the grazing cattle in close association, a sight you are most likely to catch if you live in farmed rural areas, is a classical example of commensalism. The egrets always forage closely to where the cattle are grazing because the cattle, as they move, stir up, flush out the insects from the vegetation that otherwise might be difficult for the egrets to find and catch. Another example of commensalism is the interaction between the sea anemone that has stinging tentacles and the clownfish that lives among them. The fish gets protection from predators which stay away from the stinging tentacles. The anemone does not appear to derive any of the nutrition by hosting the clownfish. The last interaction, but very important, all the examples cited are given in the PYQs. Mutualism. This interaction confers benefits on both the interacting species. Lichens represent an intimate mutualistic relationship between the fungus and the photosynthesizing algae or cyanobacteria. Similarly, the mycorrhiza are associations between the fungi and the roots of the higher plants. The fungi help the plants in the absorption of essential nutrients from the soil, while the plants in turn provides the fungi with high yielding carbohydrates. The most spectacular and evolutionarily fascinating examples of mutualism are found in plant animal relationships. Plants need the help of animals for pollinating their flowers and dispersing their seeds. Animals obviously have to be paid fees for the services that plants expect from them. Plants offer rewards or fees in the form of pollen and nectar for pollinators and juicy and nutritious fruits for the seed dispersers. dispersers. But the mutually beneficial system should also be safeguarded against cheaters. For example, animals that try to steal nectar without aiding in pollination. Now you can see why plant animal interactions often involve co-evolution of the mutualist. That is, the evolution of the flowers and its pollinator species are tightly linked with one another. In many species of fig trees, there is a tight one-to-one relationship with the pollinator species of wasp. It means that a given fig species can be pollinated only by a partner wasp species and other species no other species. The female wasp uses the fruit not only as oviposition or for egg laying site, but uses the developing seeds within the fruit of nourishing its larva. The wasp pollinates the fig inflorescence while searching for suitable egg laying sites. In addition, for the favor of pollination, the fig offers the wasp some of its developing seeds as food for developing wasp larvae. Orchids, it's not orchids, it's orchids. Orchids show a bewildering diversity of floral patterns, many of which have evolved to attract the right pollinator insect, bees and bumblebees, and ensure guaranteed pollination by it. Not all orchids offer rewards. Hi Shubham Kaushik. Thank you for joining live. Not all orchids offer rewards. The Mediterranean orchid ophioris employs sexual deceit to get pollination done by a species of bee. One petal of its flower bears an uncanny resemblance to the female of the bee in size, color, and markings. The male bee is attracted to what is it perceives as a female and pseudo copulates with the flower, and during that process is dusted with pollen from the flower. When the same bee pseudo copulates with another flower, it transfers pollen to it and thus pollinates the flower. Here you can see how co-evolution operates. If the female bee color pattern change even slightly for any reason during evolution, pollination success will be reduced unless the orchid flower co-evolves to maintain the resemblance of its petal to the female bee. So with this, I am done with the reading of word by word chapter 11 Organisms and Populations from the NCERT. In case it helped you in revision, do hit the like button, share with your friends so that they can also revise in the similar way, and it could be helpful to them as well for their board, CUET and NEET.